Today's chat is brought to you by, well, all of your support. Through the patronage you provide the Focus Fire chat team through Podbean's crowdfunding, we are able to provide you with the weekly podcast as well as the website and other aspects of Focus Fire chat. If you have any interest in becoming a patron of the FFC, please be sure to visit our website and click on the support link. Even a single dollar helps, and for those of you who are already patrons, thank you again for your generosity. You may have heard the whispers of guardians gathering in the shadows, exploring the mysteries of this world and the worlds which surround us. We are all in search of truth. Sometimes we need to focus that search, focus that fire. And so we come together. Join us. Join the discussion. Welcome to Focused Fire Chat. Welcome to Focus Fire Chat, recorded live on August 16th, 2019, over on twitch.tv/FocusFireChat. As always, I want to give a big shout out to our live chat here with us tonight. Thank you so much for joining us once again. This week's episodes are going to be focused around exploring the topic of the lore book Nothing Ends. This particular episode will serve as what we lovingly call the introductory session of the week's exploration. Before we go any further, however, let's run through a quick introduction of all those who we have with us on the show. As always, this is your host, Blue Crew 86. Next up, we have our own master of social media, the one and only Green-Eyed Music Lover. Green, I hope you're doing well. How's the week treated you so far?
I have 24 hours, less than 24 hours left at this house for the house sitting stuff. So I am excited to get home and to... My sister's coming this next week, so we have a little bit of cleaning and final touches on the house to do before she gets here, but it's been a pretty good week. I'm excited to get home, though.
That's understandable. And last, but definitely not least, in the hot seat as guest co-host, we have our good friends from the Guardians of Lore podcast, Hyven and Elmist. Guys, how are you doing? Well, let me start. Hyven, how are you doing?
I'm doing fine. Glad to be
okay.
here.
Elvis, how are you doing?
Doing great.
All right, there we go. All right, so we're usually it's just one person, so I'm like I am not used to having to tell people to go in order.
We should have practiced in tandem. I guess.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, we're doing
Speaking
great.
as one voice.
One of us go deep, one of us go high. Make it real creepy.
Just be off like half a beat.
About.
So, as usual, I guess give us a bit of a rundown on where we can find you guys out in the internet and the world. Where's the best place to locate you guys?
So,
LMS, why don't you start with that? Yeah, right.
Yeah, so Mrs. Hyven, she is currently in chat, but not on the actual, audio. She handles our Twitter account, and that's at Guardians_lore. And we have our podcast posted on Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, usual places.
We also got the email.
We've also got an email at guardians_lore@outlook.com.
Cool. All right. Well, and obviously, don't worry about trying to memorize all that. I'll be sure to get all the links posted over in our show notes on thelorenetwork.com when the deep dive segment or the advanced session goes live this week. But for this week, Green, you were kind enough to ask the community about their thoughts on something related to Nothing Ends. So how did everyone do on this week's Lore Pop Quiz?
I got some real interesting answers this week. Because it's not like I asked a contentious question or anything.
You didn't ask a contentious question.
I mean... Yeah, I got some interesting responses, though. And the question this week was, do you feel that Shin/Vale's methods of identifying those who stray off of sorrow's road and eventually eliminating them are justified? Why or why not? The community was actually... They were tighter split than I thought they would be. 66% said yes, that his methods were justified, and 34% said no, his methods were not justified. There was a couple of different comments that I thought were really interesting. Snake 231K said, the general concept I understand and agree with. His methods are extreme, putting it mildly. Guardians are given a lot of freedom. Dredgen Yor is a good example of things left unchecked, and a lot of light was cut because of him. To weed out those who can't help themselves to overindulging in power and falling to darkness can save a lot of lives and make us stronger overall. Nero said, I disagree with his methods. It's a misleading trap that leaves little room for redemption. There are other examples in game of entities that were desperate in their circumstances and deserve to be redeemed, i.e. some of the fallen. His form of capital punishment removes that. Dredgen Air. Shin doesn't understand how the deep works, even once he's willing to accept a bit of gray. He thinks about the darkness as something to be conquered and then used, not the constant struggle it really is. Also, I love him, but he's an overdramatic bleep and needs to chill. Dat Rando said, though extreme, his methods made it so no more Dredgen Yors arose. He understood what Yor was trying to do, but the way Yor went about it was even more twisted than how Shin is going about it. He goes on to say that we, the Guardians, basically perfected the road he wanted Shin to walk. So there's a lot of different perspectives that people said. Some of them I personally disagree with. Some of them I think are a little maybe underread with that. But I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you think that his methods were justified?
I personally think that I have a mixed thoughts on that also. I understand his philosophy behind what he was doing. They were going down a path that they thought they needed to take, and of course he knew that some would stray. And why it makes sense to weed them out before they become a problem, I think that he quite possibly could have influenced people into taking action that they might not have taken. But granted, he does say that he would prefer to have words with some, but unfortunately that doesn't seem to be the case most of the time. So my thinking is just that while a check and balance system needed to be in place, Shin quite possibly could have influenced people to go over the edge more so than they would have just by tempting the darkness themselves.
What about you, Blue?
I think, and Dino and I are actually on the same page, which mark this. Dino and I are on the same, no, I'm joking. Dino actually brought up the exact point that I was going to bring up, is that I get the, this is similar to my response to people's distaste of Anor. I get the distaste for Shin. I understand that. And if Shin was indeed the character that they are portraying him to be, I would be on the same page. However, he's not. We have repeated references to Shin being really, really adamant about trying to talk people down. He is repeatedly trying to talk them out of doing, the road to sorrow. He is constantly, he tests them, yes, but at the same time, the stakes that they're playing at, it doesn't require soft hands. It does require a hard lesson. But the other thing that a lot of people think is, or that a lot of people tend to over-focus on when it comes to Shin, especially with all the revelations that have come to light, is that there's this incorrect assumption that he's just running around gunning down people, and that's really not what he's doing. He's constantly trying to redirect them, and he's not balking at the situations in which he has to take. And this is where the play on the last word comes from, because he will make sure that the last word is that of the light. And that is where, and we see a lot of those examples, yes, but we also see repeated references to those examples that he has not done that to. He has edged people away from that. And he's taken the curiosity that's within those guardians and guided them safely, into either shadows or back into the light. And
here's the thing that I want to bring up though with him is that it's like when you have children. So I'm a former teacher, right? So kids will act a certain way in front of a teacher or in front of their parents, and then they will act a completely different way in front of a whole different group of people.
Right.
So if oftentimes kids will act out in school because their parents aren't there. Shin, knowing this, sets up a situation to give the opportunity for them to really act the way that they're instinctually wanting to act, whether they're going to go down Sorrow's road and follow Callum, which we'll get into, I'm sure, but or to step away and not follow that and to be true to the road. So it's a manipulative move, but it's also, I think, a needed one to truly see what people are actually going for when it comes to Sorrow's Road. Are they in for a very selfish reason or whatnot, and how are they getting into it? What do you think, Lou?
I mean, just to interject too, I know, yes, you're 100% correct. It is a manipulation, but manipulation's a delicate word, right? It's not always a negative thing. And a lot of times it is. I fully recognize that. But this particular manipulation, there are times and places in which manipulation is necessary for, and it's I know the chat mentioned this as well, it's the argument for the greater good. There are times in which manipulation of details are required because there are legit forces that are out there that will misuse that information. You can't be completely transparent. It's a terrible thing to say this, but you can't be transparent all the time because it will get taken advantage of. That being said, you have to be very careful, and I think that you see that because Dino is also talking about this here. He says that Shin put extreme amounts of effort to paint the Shadows of Yor in the worst light publicly. He isn't the guy that's out there saying, "Hey, come down the dark path." Actually, he's the guy saying, "Don't." Or if you do, he is the one who is furthering the legend, the man with the golden gun, saying, "This is the price that you will pay if you court the darkness." However, he's not advertising the Shadows. People joined, the Guardians that joined the Shadows, they joined of their own accord. They joined because they were already searching for that. Shin didn't encourage them to come to the dark. They were already looking. Now, once they got there, and you're right, we'll get there when we're talking about, like, especially the eulogy of Callum, because we see with Callum that there's a logic, a rhyme to the meaning of their names that they take on. But, basically what Shin saw, and, Teb and Callum, all the what I've come to kind of refer to as the true Shadows, they all saw this disparate group of Guardians who were just going willy-nilly searching. You have Toland, Toland's the primary one. You had Osiris running Exile. There's a lot of disparity and a lot of the splintering of all these faiths of Guardians on what exactly they're supposed to be doing. And Shin is seeing that, and so basically it's you can look at the Shadows of Yor as, yeah, sure, it's a honeypot, it's a roach motel, if you will, or whatever you want to call it, whatever word for trap you want. But what it does is it brings all those people who were already splintering, these were already schismatic individuals, but it brings all those schismatic individuals back into a chokehold or choke point. And then Shin, again, he is constantly coming back to, he is trying to have an honest conversation with them. He will give them we have an exact scene of exactly that. He is having a confrontation with Shadows of the Yor, and Anor makes the assumption that he is going to kill them. But I mean, we don't know because we never see the full thing play out. And it's the bias that is being portrayed here from all sides. I mean, Shin's not innocent here. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is, like, to simplify him down into a Punisher level vigilante does a disservice to what he actually is doing.
Mm-hmm. Hyven?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with those thoughts, and I don't think that is as black and white as just he is bad because he's killing people. For me, I think that I'm on board with Shin's tactics, to be honest, because I think he does. We'll get into what his end goal is. In order to walk this gray line, he's going to have to attract some of those darker-minded Guardians. My only thinking is that by giving somebody a group to be part of, maybe it might fuel some of the intentions that they might not have acted on their own. But as Blue mentioned, he definitely has given everyone an option. I mean, Letters from a Renegade is exactly kind of that for us. And he warns us that if we go too far down that path, he will take action. So I definitely think he's handling it lightly. Well, not lightly, but correctly, properly. But at the same time, it's one of those things where sometimes if you don't have an outlet, maybe you don't go so far that there is no recourse, that you can't come back. So that was kind of my only thinking on the argument. But as a whole, I think that what he's doing is very effective, and honestly, you can't argue with results at some level.
Alamus?
Completely agree. Like, Shin at this point has given these guardians who were turning to the darkness an outlet. That way he can control how they are seeking out the darkness. That way, if there is a corruption, he can snuff it out as quick as possible. And if there's any guardians who aren't truly looking for that, then they're going to get weeded out anyway.
I can definitely see that. It is, and we're definitely going to get into that with the advanced episode when we dive a little bit deeper into the book. As far as this episode goes, Blue, do you have anything else before we kind of dive into the background and everything?
No, I think I agree with both of those statements. I think the thing that makes me with the group piece, I think, is it goes into the chicken egg argument, right? It's like which one came first, and I think that's a really good argument too. Is like, you know, did the group already, like, was it because the group that they went down the dark road, or was it they were already going down the dark road and the group just helped? You know, like, you can have that cyclical argument, and both sides have legit points. But yeah, no, I like it. I know. Well, I love hearing the thoughts. You know, even the thoughts that, you know, I disagree with, or Green disagrees with, or we agree with. I mean, the conversations that those thoughts and those questions, those opinions, they spark these conversations, and that's the crux, the heart of what we want. Is we want to have those conversations. That means that people are actually thinking. You know, think for yourselves. Like, question everything. You know, what is the Assassin's Creed thing? Everything's allowed. Question everything. Or I'm sure I butchered that. But so we always love hearing those thoughts. So be sure to keep them coming. Green, you toss those questions out on Twitter each week. I believe that's on your Twitter account, right? Green Eyed Music Lover. It
is. And I do tend to retweet it through the Focus Fire chat. So if you are not following me directly and you're following FFC, you'll likely see it. But yes, those come directly from my account.
Perfect. And then I know that we have it set up on our Discord server to automatically scrape those in there, so they get a chance to weigh in on them as well, just in case you're not, you know, if you're among those who aren't as comfortable with the Twitterverse. But, you know, enough with my chatter. I know everyone is looking forward to diving into the discussion, so let's get the standard housekeeping notes out of the way, and then we'll get right into it. Last week, we discussed the menagerie. If you're enjoying the show, please be sure to rate, and if you don't mind, leave us a review on iTunes or comment on the episodes on Podbean or whichever podcasting app you use to enjoy podcasts. Reviews are extremely helpful, as they not only let us know what we can do better for you, but also help to continue to expand the FFC family, allowing more and more perspectives to be heard. To those of you who have already taken the time to leave us a review, thank you. As many of you are aware, Focus Fire Chat is a community in which we offer the chance to dive into lore from within various titles and mediums, with a special focus on the Destiny universe. Every Friday at about 10 p.m. Central, the podcast team gets together to stream a summary of the chosen topic for that week. The hope for this is to help encourage dives into aspect of game lore within both our Discord server and within the other communities we share the digital world with. If you're a fan of lore in all its various forms, be sure to also check out thelorenetwork.com, a central hub for content that covers a wide variety of different titles and mediums. Our full show notes for each week's topic will be posted here, so for the additional information or guest details, be sure to check the site out. Next week's topic is going to be a preparation discussion for Shadowkeep. That being said, however, we still want to hear your thoughts about this week's topic. Be sure to weigh in over on Discord, and don't be shy in tagging any of the team in the conversation. We cannot wait to read what your thoughts are. And then, so basically, Green, I'm gonna let you continue doing your amazing job as our resident lore master and leading us through the intro.
You are setting things up in a funny way tonight. I know why you're doing it, but it's fine. It's fine. It's whatever. So one of the things I want to do with the introduction episode for people who may just be jumping into the story of Destiny, the story of Destiny itself does not cover Last Word or Thorn really at all until you get into D2 when you're getting the weapons again. Unless you dive into the lore itself or in the written lore, you're not going to know what's going on really until you get to when we see Callum's ashes strewn up against the rock, and that's the only in-game stuff we really have. So what I'd like to do with this episode in particular, the introduction one, is to kind of go and do a recap of the Last Word and Thorn story and kind of where we are at before we get to Nothing Ends, the book that we're discussing this evening. Blue, you are so weird. I don't even know how to go on from here. I'm just going to Blue tag.
Oh, so basically, I don't even know where I'm supposed to go with this.
Basic story of Last Word Thorn.
Oh man, Last Word Thorn. Okay, so way back in the Wayback Machine. Actually, you know what? Here, I'll just list out some of the episodes that we've talked. We've talked about this. We started way back on episode 19. This was the Dredge and Yor and Jaren Ward episode, and like I said, episode 19. We're on episode 177, and it's gonna. I mean, this is one of the longest running stories. Arguably, this story has been running. Actually, it has been running ever since D1 dropped.
Since D1.
So this story is 4+ years in the making, and it has continued to grow. And so we started the analysis with episode 19 with Dredge and Yor and Jaren Ward. Then we jumped to Dredge and Thorn in episode 56. We did a recap of the story up till that point at episode 81 with the story of Yor. Then we did another recap because we kept getting more and more supplements in Yor's legacy. That was around the time that we learned the first learning about the Shadows of Yor, and that was episode 156. Then we got the Book of Unmaking with 159, Letters from a Renegade, which we had mentioned in the intro, with 161, and then For Every Rose of Thorn book was 165, and then now with Nothing Ends, this is 177. So we have gone through, 7 episodes. This is the 8th episode, and all those previous episodes, those were some of our longest episodes. I'm gonna not lie. I know that like Story of Yor and Yor's The Legacies were easily 2+ hours of discussion on those, because there's.
If I remember correctly, 81. The Story of Yor was when we had Bife on.
Yeah, I want to say it was either that one or because Story of Yor was the one with Bandit number 1. And that one I think was like 2.5, maybe 3 hours. Like that was a deep dive.
It was almost 3.
Was it 3? Okay. Oh yeah, that's right. You were saying you had just listened to that. But I mean, it's like there is a ton of content, and the thing that, again, and I've said this a lot too with Thorn and Last Word. The cool thing, the reason that this story still stands out so strongly for me is actually the actual story is pretty simplistic. Like it's very, very linear in the presentation looking now. However, at the time when we were actually introduced to these things, it was drip fed to us in very sporadic bursts, and they were all out of order. So there was a lot of puzzling together the pieces with this particular story, especially in D1. We didn't have
with Rezel in particular.
With Rezel, with Dredge and Yor, Rezel. We still, I mean, there's still a lot of that we don't know, especially about Ward, with Ward's ghost and Shin's ghost. We don't know if there's a number of theories about that. Like this is arguably Nothing Ends is arguably a potential. I don't think it is, but it is technically a potential conclusion to the story. Personally, I don't think it will end, because I think, and that's because of some of the stuff that we've talked to the writers about. I don't think it's over just yet. And the cool thing is that while the story of Thorn and the Last Word were set in periods that we don't know when, we know roughly when they were happening, but we don't know exactly when in the timeline, if you want to call it that, the time amoeba of of Destiny. We don't really know where exactly the stands took place. We're getting a better idea, but we don't know exactly. Whereas those were kind of amorphous. Everything in D2 has been pretty much concurrent with what is going on in game. Nothing Ends is actually taking place right now in game. For Every Rose of Thorn took place at the time it dropped. Letters from a Renegade, War to Our Guardian. It was as it dropped. There are very specific things that have been brought to concurrent. So we are now seeing a convergence of the story of Shin, at least, with our own. And that's really cool, too. I really kind of like seeing Shin, in a way, react to our Guardian as not just as a arbitrary narrator. But really quick, Thorn and Last Word, basically we see the rise and fall of a massive hero. Originally he went by the name of Rezel Azir. He was arguably one of, if not the leaders of the newly formed Guardians at the time. With the Last City, he was responsible for a lot of the protection and the giving of hope, which is something that is a constant theme in this story. But over time, he basically, through pride, got waylaid and fell. And part of that fall was the shedding of Rezel's name and the taking up of Dredgen Yor's name. And that took place on the moon.
With the wizard and the knight.
Yes.
The betrothed.
Yes, and that is where he was still Rezel at that time, but that's when the Whispers started with him, because he basically took the bones of the knight and grafted them onto his hand cannon, which at the time was Rose. The Rose would become Thorn. Now, after that occurred, we don't know how much time passed. We have an idea that it was a pretty good amount of time. There were things that we are pretty sure happened, such as the death of Pahanin, the death of the arguable death of Thalor, the domination of the Crucible. All these things were going on. Dredgen Yor became very, very infamous. Dredgen Yor became basically the Guardian's equivalent of a boogeyman in a way. And this all culminated with a final stand. Well, let me take that back real quick. One of the things that happened following the corruption of Rezel and the formation of Dredgen Yor was that there was a town named Palamon, and there was a child there who went by the name of Shin Malphur. Now, Shin has his own story that we've also explored as well. We explored a bit of it in Ghost Stories, and throughout a couple of I think it was the Book of Unmaking and the Letters from a Renegade, we kind of talked about that a little bit. But Shin has his own backstory that it's important, but it's not important to this particular piece. What is
right? But the last stand is pretty important,
right?
Though.
Yeah, but
I think the build up to the last stand is arbitrary in relation to it. I mean, there's the concept of Shin
joining with Jaren,
getting involved, right? So that is the only really major important thing if we're going to cliff note it. Jaren and Shin hook up, and there's
Jaren basically becomes a father figure for Shin because Dredgen Yor destroys Palamon. And so then that leads to them hunting after Dredgen, which then leads to Jaren's being killed, which then leads to Shin seeking his own revenge, which then leads us all the way into the last stand, or the stand on Dwindler's Ridge.
As far as and I actually want the guys from Guardian of Lore, or the Guardians of Lore, Ellimist and Hyven, to kind of take that lead on that one, because we have two different perspectives on it now. We have the original perspective, and then the perspective that we're getting from the newer book. So if you guys could kind of tag team and do the initial one that we got, the story that we had initially gotten, the legend that we got, and then kind of dive into the newer information that we have on it, I think that'd be pretty awesome.
Yeah, sure. Do you want to start, Ellimist?
Well, I was going to tell you that you could.
Either way, I can rant for a long time, so I'll let you get going. I'll chime in.
All right, so the original legend was that, like Blue had said, Dredgen Yor happened across Palamon, wiped everybody out, and so it was Jaren and Shin. Eventually, Dredgen Yor killed Shin, and that drove... Dredgen Yor killed Jaren, and that drove Shin to seek revenge. After years of training and building up his light, and with the help of Jaren's ghost, they actually do have a showdown. It was like Shin just popped his golden gun and shot Dredgen Yor, killing him. Final death and all. But in the cards, they never actually mentioned that Dredgen Yor pulled his gun or anything.
Yeah, and I was just going to chime in. I forget what book it is in, but Shin talks about how the fact that he was painted as in a way that made him seem innocent, if that maybe changed our view of his justification for his actions. And while the original story was told from the perspective of a boy who watched his whole world crash down, whereas now he's letting us in on a little bit more of some of the details about the event and how things were not exactly as they were originally explained. He's given us some details about Yor's motivations, his own, and it's definitely changing a little bit of the perspective we, as reading the lore, can gain, but it also seems that the perspective of Shin changed over a considerable period of time.
So from the perspective, the new information that we have, you kind of touched on it a little bit with the fact that the cards never said that Rezel or Dredgen Yor ever drew his weapon. That was what I had interpreted as far as like the new information that we got on that, is that, hey, it wasn't that Shin was more powerful necessarily than Yor. It's the fact that Yor kind of set himself down and passed on the torch, so to speak.
Well, I would disagree. Because the thing is that it was that Shin was more powerful than Yor. That was the entire lesson that Yor was actually teaching. Because Yor had a tendency to let others fire first. We saw that with Jaren, and Jaren was unable to kill him with a mundane bullet. And to be fair, to be clear, Jaren was also in possession of the last word. It was the actual God, I just blanked. The transfusion of light that Shin was able to manifest through the golden gun that actually burned Yor and killed him. Because that was that force, that this concept of this forced evolution, this chain that we'll definitely get into with the Nothing Ends conversation. Because each step in the evolution is able to bypass or to surpass the previous chain link. Each link in the chain progressively gets stronger and stronger, and that comes back, and that's where you also see Shin call out that, there was a lesson that Yor was teaching, and he just was he was too emotional at the time to see it, but now that he's had time to reflect and all that, he's understanding that it wasn't necessarily Yor wasn't necessarily the force of nature that everyone thinks he was. He wasn't a good thing, though. Like, he definitely wasn't good, but there was something to be gained from the time that Shin spent with following his footsteps, chasing the man in black across the desert, if you will. And when he finally did take Yor down, it was because Yor let him. Like, Yor gave him the first shot because that was the test. The test was, if you have the first shot, are you able to put me down? He gave Jaren the same thing, and Jaren was not able. Jaren shot, and Jaren doesn't miss. But that was the whole thing, is like, because that was in the original conversation that we had back in D1 between Jaren's ghost and Yor. Jaren's ghost calls that out. He says, Jaren never misses. And he's like, nope, he doesn't. He's like, but you're still alive. Yep. And he's not. And like that's the thing, is like Thorn was already a paracausal weapon at that point. The last word, at least in Jaren's hands, was not. And that's the infusion that Shin brings to the last word, which then allows him to surpass Yor. So in a way, I would argue that Shin actually proves that he is stronger than Yor, in the same way that we now see with Nothing End, his acknowledgement that through the purification of the original Thorn that becomes Lumina, we are now surpassing Shin. And that's actually, again, we'll get into it, but that's actually part of the argument that he makes in the first entry, the Eternal Chain, was you are the next link in the chain of our evolution. Just in the same way, eventually there will come one that will be the next link after you, and that's kind of the metaphor that he uses to explain this stuff.
Black Flag is saying something that I agree with as well. Last word alone was not paracausal. It took the blazing rage of Shin's fire to end
the infusion of his light,
his
light into the golden gun, the catalyst of that rage, or the catalyst that was his rage, was what enabled him to evolve as a guardian. He literally was able to manifest his light in a new fashion. And this is where it kind of gets difficult, right? Because we don't know for certain if Shin was the first golden gun user. I know this is a very big debate. And Dino, that's exactly right. Dino is talking about that. Because the other thing about Shin's golden gun is it is different. It is different than our golden gun. Shin can hold it indefinitely, it seems.
Frolicking through the forest with the golden gun that never ends.
God, it's so annoying. I'm like Anor. Like that entire entry is both amazing and annoying at the same time. But like that's where the legend of the man with the golden gun, that's where it sparked. That's where it came to be, is because that was how he defeated Yor. And so there's a legend now that Shin was the first user of the golden gun. There's not enough information for me to say one way or the other, comfortably. I see both sides. It also, I don't know. That particular one, just for right now, we don't have enough input. We don't have enough facts to weigh in, I think.
Ivan, what do you think?
Yeah, I was going to say exactly what Blue was starting out, that he kind of gave everyone the first shot. It was part of what he was looking to fulfill. It just made me think of, in the Thorn card, his Thorn 4, his last conversation with his ghost. His ghost said a man can be killed, and he says, there it is, a sliver of hope. And why I don't necessarily know that it was him wanting to die. I think it's almost sword logic, like he was looking for somebody who could become strong enough to progress. Kind of what he had started. I think he realized that maybe his path had veered from what his original intent was. But I think he knew what he was doing in basically helping Shin to fuel that rage that progressed him forward. So I think that was why he gave people the first shot. He was looking for somebody who was more than him.
Right. And we get that in the Letters from a Renegade, where Shin even discusses this concept of was he essentially a tired soldier ready to move on or whatnot, or was it literally me just being able to do it? So, because
from the beginning, I had always thought that it was. I kind of always assumed that he hadn't raised his gun. It was odd. It always felt wrong to me. And I know some people like to just say, Shin's just he just finished him so fast. But I kind of appreciated the depth that we've gotten in these cards. That it really does seem that I don't think we'll ever know what was going on in Yor's head, but there was definitely something else going on other than just a basic duel and him just trying to, raise towns and destroy things.
Yeah. So since we've had Dwindler's Ridge and Dredge and Yor being killed by Shin, the whole legend of the man with the golden gun starts up, and then towards the end of D1 we get the appearance of shadows within the lore a little bit. So we have the concept of these various shadows showing up and doing things that would be towing the line. A lot of people thought they were kind of sort of bad guys, which they kind of sort of put themselves up as bad guys, but they show up for a while, and fast forward through D2 a little bit, we get more of their story with Shen in some of the different books that we've gotten since then. Do we want to touch on any of these in particular in relation to Nothing Ends, or I'm trying to figure out a good way to kind of segue us into the advanced episode.
I mean, are you talking about like the shadows in particular?
Mm-hmm. And their purpose and the reason why they came about.
They do. There is a mention. Excuse me. There is a mention of the true shadows that we'll see. Like I kind of refer to them as the inner circle, if you will, that we know are still around. And I think, let me pull it up real quick. It was Dredgen, Tatalis was one. That's Braga, Yasul, Kalimsol, obviously, which we'll talk about here. I have these listed on my list here, just making sure. Dredgen Meyer, which is Jonah Pavik. Dredgen, who was the other one? Dredgen Vale, which is Shin, and then Dredgen Bane, which is Tebin. Technically, the Drifter was involved, but I don't think that debate is still going in my head. He was Dredgen Hope, technically. Dredgen Scar is Zana Mas, which is the other one. Those are the Dredgens that actually were within, with the exception of Dredgen Hope or the Drifter, which I still am on the fence about. The other ones that I mentioned, those are actually mentioned as being kind of aware of this whole thing. Like they are aware of what's going on, which I think is important because that kind of sets the stage that, there's a lot of conversation about, did Shin do all this playing everybody? And the answer that I've always kind of felt was the case is no, there's no way he could have pulled this off, especially with the involvement of Bane and him. Bane and Vale were like, they're crossing fingers, like they were back to back on a lot of stuff. And there's no way that I think that they could have coordinated that, or Shin I don't think alone could have. And we basically get confirmation that all of the inner circle of the shadows were aware of Shin's person. Like Shin was Vale, and they were aware of that dual face that he was wearing. And that's really important with the very beginning of the Nothing Ends book, because that's the final revelation of the truth about Callum, which I think is, if you have not read it, I really encourage you to go read it, because it answers the whole debate with the part in, I think it's the Malfeasance quest at the very end. It answers the problem or the questions that a lot of people had about the ghost that Callum the ghost that Callum stabs. We know now that that was not his ghost. We actually know Callum's ghost's name now, which is Paola. And she is, for all intents and purposes, she is still around. We don't know. We know that Callum is not. Callum was, he agreed to RTL, or Return to Light. And that was his sacrifice. That was his sacrifice in order to allow for the culling of the shadows. And that's another thing that I think is kind of an interesting nod, is that all these titles seem to have a indicator of what they're doing. Dredgen Coal it's interesting to me that Dredgen Coal was the catalyst for the cull of the shadows. We talked about Dredgen Vale, and like a veil. It's spelled Vale, but it's also it sounds like a veil that you put over your eyes. Which brings into question, what is Dredgen Hope for the Drifter, Dredgen Totalis for Braga, Dredgen Bane, all these other ones, Meyer, Scar, and then what was I think that was all of them. That's the thing that I think is the question for me right now, is where do they get these titles? Like or title, or the names, because they're shedding their second names or what have you. Where does that come from? I think is a good question that I would love to see a little bit more exploration on. But I think as far as like the shadows themselves, I would argue that if anything, this book is a mark, and I think Dino and I were talking about this in chat just a minute ago. If anything, I think Nothing Ends is, if it's a conclusion to any story, it's a conclusion to the story of the Shadows of Yor. It's not. I don't agree that it's a conclusion to Shin's story, but yeah, that's because of external information. But yeah, I think
it's a passing of the mantle, at least, of sorts, a conclusion of a chapter.
Right. It's a conclusion of a chapter, but as everyone knows, the conclusion of one chapter is just simply the beginning of another.
I mean, nothing ends though, right? So.
Right. Oh gosh, yeah. Yeah, it's almost like there was a anyways.
What do you think we should wrap up there and use that as the introduction episode? I know that we're still trying to figure out exactly where to parse this one out because it is such a massive story.
Hard not to take a deep dive
at this point. Oh, it is. It really is. But this, I think, that gives us a good introduction to everything and a good basis of what to do or what to pull from as we're getting into this debate of this next book that we're going to actually talk about.
Yeah, and
Blue's hinting at it a bit.
Yeah, and real quick, Dino's putting it pretty succinctly and really well. It's quite literally the conclusion of the Last Word Thorn story, because now we have both of them. This is, just to be clear, we now have the original Last Word and the original Thorn. There is now a confirmation that is where these two artifacts have been, or are now. We know where they are. They are in the Guardian's hands. Now, that brings up a whole different argument about MMOs and lore canon and all that, but we know that the exotic weapon Thorn that becomes Lumina, and then the exotic weapon The Last Word that we got also here, those are the original guns. So this is the conclusion of that story, because that's literally the bringing together of those two artifacts. But yes, so I guess real quick, so before we'll do our shout outs, and then obviously we are gonna jump into the advanced session, which you guys will be able to hear later this week by the time you're hearing this episode. But real quick, shout outs just for the intro session. Guardians of Lore, as guests, you guys get to go first. Do you guys have any big shout outs for this one?
Elemis, do you want to get started? I talk too much, man.
Sure. Shout out to you guys for allowing us to be here and talk your ear off, because we know that I'm the talkative one. And shout out to Mrs. Hyven for getting us connected.
Yay, the woman behind.
Yes, I have to second those. Shout out to my wife, Mrs. Hyven. She never would have expected her to be interested in being in our podcast, but it was a happy surprise. And as someone who is not very active on Twitter or any social media, she really handles the page. And anytime you are talking to Guardians of Lore, you are talking to her. So shout out to her, and of course to you guys for having us on. Always enjoy talking about the lore.
Thank you. It's really a lot of fun to have people on who do dives like we do. Like, I love our guests that are kind of green in the lore, because we get to teach them. But you guys, we actually get to utilize your knowledge as well, and everyone gets to hear the perspectives from a different point of view. So, and you guys on. So that's one of my shout-outs. I'm going to steal it from Blue real quick, because I know that's one of his shout-outs.
Rude.
So, ha ha ha. I know, it's fine. You love me. But as far as another shout-out, and I'm just going to kind of roll with it, shout-out to coffee. Because that is...
God, man, you're taking all my shout-outs.
I know.
You thefter.
It's like I planned
Oh,
this.
you
I am
thefter.
such a shadow. I'm such a shadow. I'm just going to steal all your things. Anyway, shout out to coffee. Shout out to just the wives of any content creator or significant other of content creator in general, because we can't do this without your necessarily permission, but without your good grace of this. So thank you. Thank you for that. Blue, your turn.
I'm trying to decide if I'm going to be like super snarky and do this.
When are you not?
Okay, fair enough.
it.
I want to give a shout out to all the lore masters. No. I'm just... This is kind of throwback to a conversation we had on Twitter this afternoon. But I think it's silly to base what you refer to someone as based off anything. If they know what they're talking about, they know what they're talking about in the story, as far as I'm concerned. So just if that's I don't even know.
That's incredibly vague.
I don't know how to. Okay, so basically I got involved in a conversation in which it was brought up that female gamers or female fans discuss narrative and lore and they get called dumb, whereas if a male gamer or fan discusses lore, they're called lore masters. And I basically responded with the fact that this is beyond silly, and that if you are going through this and have anyone who is going through this, that please send them to our chat, because I don't care if you know what you're talking about. I will chat your ear off. You can ask Green about this. I will chat your ear off if you start talking about something that I'm passionate about, that you're passionate about. And it doesn't matter if you're purple. It doesn't matter if, not purple the person, purple like the whatever. God, that was a terrible red.
Colors aren't safe.
Colors are not safe. I keep being reminded of that. But like, it doesn't matter to me. I don't care. And I don't think that's one of the best things about the Focus Fire community, is that is a general consensus. No one cares about that component. I don't care if you're wearing pajamas and sitting with your bare feet on the table. I don't worry if you're, a woman, a girl, a man, a robot. I'd probably talk to you more if you were a robot. But, I don't care. I don't care if you're a dog. Bring your dogs. I love dogs. Let's talk to dogs. But it's just, to me, it's, why can't you just have a conversation? And that's the big thing for me that's kind of triggered me today, is like this just repeated conversation that seems to be going around about how you don't fit in the box, so you're not allowed to join us. And it's just stupid. And I just, a big shout out to FFC, because thankfully it's such a non-issue in our chat on Discord and in the Twitter conversations that I involve myself with because of the Focus Fire community. Anywhere that I see Focus Fire people talking, this is nowhere in there. Nowhere in there is there something like this. And I just, huge shout out to the community that has grown up around our ramblings and our silliness, and just gotten to be seriously one of the best places I can think of to spend my time, and one of the safest places that I can think of to spend my time. I'll be honest, I have no hesitation if my son wanted to game with most of the people that I game with, because they game with Focus Fire people. There's no question that I would let any of them play with him. And he's a 6-year-old. Like, I don't have a problem with any of them getting on a chat. And actually, now that I say that, most of them have gotten on chats with my son. And and they, no problem at all. I don't have to worry about anything. And I think that cannot be said enough as a thank you to the community here, that the more I kind of venture out into the world, the more I'm like, nope. I'm going back to where I know it is. Except for apparently wet chinchilla. They're not child friendly, I guess. Apparently. According to wet chinchilla.
It's okay, Chinchilla. You can come and we can play, and I have an adult chat. It's fine. It'll be fine.
Yes, and if they were a tree, we would, never mind.
No, let's not bring up this tree thing again. Chat is never going to let me live this down. It's fine. Oh my gosh. Okay, so I don't know how we're going to say goodbye on this one. Do you have a sign off for us, Blue, for this introduction episode?
Hang on. I had some written down.
Oh my gosh.
No, I can't find it. I can't find it. I had a list. But I don't know where it went. Bye.
I don't know.
All right, that's done. Moving on. With that, we'll begin to wrap the chat up. Thank you again to those over on Twitch for coming to spend your evening with us. If you'd like to join us for the live streaming of the episodes, please be sure to give us a follow over on twitch.tv/focusedfirechat. Links to all our episode archives can also be found at www.focusedfirechat.com. Please be sure to email us at focusfirechat@gmail.com with any comments or questions for our team concerning the podcast, and let us know how we're doing by giving us some feedback and a rating over on iTunes as well. Also, be sure to check out all the amazing work being featured over on thelorenetwork.com. So until next time, focus your fire, and may your light shine bright.